Okay, hi guys, and welcome to the very first Cellulogic webinar. And let me just kick it off by introducing Cellulogic for a moment here. Cellulogic is a software company headquartered in Düsseldorf. What we do is we create tools or software solutions for Amazon sellers. So basically, our process is we identify tedious processes and find ways to automate them. Our main portfolio consists of a repricing solution and a tool that helps you with reimbursement claims. Now, our topic today will be listing hijacking, and for that we have an expert on the topic with us, David from David Allen Miller Law in New York. How's it going, David?
Doing well. So just a little bit about myself. I am the founding attorney at David Allen Miller Law. And today we're going to be discussing listing hijacking and brand enforcement in general. So if you're ready, I'll get started.
For sure. Let's just start off with a general question. Basically, listing hijacking, what is it and what forms does it take on? And yeah, if you could just expand on that a little bit.
Sure. So first, I want to discuss Amazon in general and how sellers go about creating listings, and then there's sellers who join listings or piggyback off of listings, right? So a listing, when a listing is hijacked, it's typically when another seller joins or piggybacks off of a listing that's already created. Now, in general, that's not a problem as long as the products are legitimate. But when that seller is offering a counterfeit version of the product, that can lead in decreases in sales for you and more negative reviews and less positive reviews. So this is what, when we're discussing listing hijacking, this is what we're talking about. So again, there's a difference between Amazon resellers and hijackers. And one way you can look out for it is negative reviews, someone claiming the buy box, or just extremely low prices.
And of course, yeah, the thing that will, of course, be a detriment for the main seller, who is actually the actual owner of the listing, is, of course, as you said, the trust issue, right? Once somebody starts reselling products from that listing as their own, but with an inferior quality, as you said, mainly over the reviews, people will stop visiting your listing or buying that product. And then at the end of the day, the hijacker is going to jump onto the next listing, the next promising listing, while the person selling the original listing is left there with a loss in trust, with a loss in value, and of course a loss in revenue. And that's why I think this is really scummy business, right?
Yeah, so it's very damaging, and like you said, that's what a lot of hijackers do. Is once they see that they can't get away with it anymore, then they run to another listing, and then you're left to clean it up. So it can be very difficult to get Amazon to remove reviews. And the main problem is that Amazon buyers are associating those negative reviews with your product, and they may not have anything to do with your product. They're just counterfeit versions of it. So that's why this is just crucial to be on the lookout for. And that's what we're going to discuss today, how to enforce it and how to protect yourself from this, from this happening.
Yeah. And just another, don't mind me just asking like a couple of questions in between. Is this sure. Has this been a particularly big issue in America? I mean, you're based in New York, right? I know that in Germany, we've heard it a couple of times as well, clients addressing that issue directly with us, which is also how we got in contact with each other. Has this been a rather big issue in America? And if yes, since when?
It's been an issue for a while. It's gotten worse and worse over the years. With the more experience that sellers have, the more they learn from some of their past mistakes. So they get better and better at some of these black hat tactics. So yes, it's been a problem for years, and I think it's getting worse and worse.
Yeah, right. Maybe as a foundation, right, before we get to the real like nitty gritty, could you maybe expand on the basics of intellectual property law? Because that's at the end of the day, the tools that you'll be working with in order to combat these hijackers, right? Yeah.
Absolutely. So I'm going to start with counterfeits. And there's always some confusion between counterfeits and trademark infringement. What's the difference? So I'm going to discuss some of those differences. Counterfeit, it's exactly what it sounds like. It's when someone's making fraudulent copies of something valuable, right? So this is I use the Canal Street example because I'm based in New York City. When you see on Canal Street, they're selling Gucci bags for $20. Everybody knows
seems legit. I'm down.
And on the street, it's like, how are the prices so good? It's unbelievable. So all counterfeits are also infringing on a trademark, but the reverse is not true. So all counterfeits trademark is also trademark infringement, but all trademark infringement does not necessarily mean that the product is counterfeit. Now, counterfeit, the main issue is deception, right? So someone is intentionally, most of the time, deceiving someone. So they're creating that bag to make it look like a Gucci bag, for our Canal Street example. Now, trademark infringement can be unintentional, and the legal standard is likelihood of confusion. So it's really deception versus confusion. Essentially, counterfeit is more severe. It's a type of trademark infringement, and it's more severe. So just to hammer home trademark and what it is, trademark law governs the use of a device. So that includes a word, a phrase, a symbol, a logo. It governs the use of a device by a manufacturer or merchant to identify its goods and to distinguish those goods from those made or sold by another. So again, it's a matter of a brand, right? So when you see that McDonald's logo, you know that they have Big Mac sauce, and you know what you're getting when you go there. So if someone opened up a hamburger place and let's say the logo looks somewhat similar to it and it created a certain level of confusion, you may have a trademark issue on your hands. So some other famous examples are the Nike swoosh, for those Nike sneakers that everyone loves, those Air Jordans, and Apple, for example. So, and as far as, I always get questions about the registration period, how long it takes and how long it's valid for. So typically it takes about a year or so for the trademark to actually be registered once it's filed. And you do have to register for it every 10 years. So it has to be renewed. Okay. So that covers counterfeit and trademark law. And I want to touch very briefly on copyright law as well. And this is, copyright protects original works of authorship, fixed and a tangible medium of expression. So what does that mean, right? So an original work of authorship, that's a literary, a dramatic, a musical, and artistic work. So it could be poetry, novels, movies, songs, right? So that's a matter of when you express it, once it's created, then you have an original work. So it's a very low standard to have. So if you write something down, you create a 3 or 4 line poem, it doesn't matter that if you create it yourself, it doesn't matter that there's something out there that is similar. If you created it, it's your own original work, you have copyright protection in it. And I also just want to briefly touch on the registration period. So like I said, registration is not mandatory here. Now, I always recommend it, which we're going to discuss later about, when we're enforcing it, why it makes it a lot easier to actually have a registration number. But as far as just blatant protection, you're still protected even if it's not actually registered. Okay, so that covers counterfeit, trademark, and copyright law. Patent law, I'm gonna touch on really briefly because it's not directly relevant to what we're discussing for the most part today, but it is the third main branch of IP law. So I feel like it's necessary to at least just touch on it. So that touches on inventions, right? So it protects tangible scientific inventions. It could be a circuit board, it could be a heating coil, it could be a zipper. These are granted when it's not a natural object or process, it's new, useful, and not obvious. Now, those bullet points sound very, very simple, but in the grand scheme of things, when you're actually filing for a patent and when lawyers analyze them, there is a lot that goes into, ensuring that it's actually new, useful, and not obvious. And lastly, there are 2 main types of patents: utility patents and design patents. Utility patents protect how an article works, right? So that's what most people think of when you invent something, some sort of new idea for whatever it is. Most people are thinking of a utility patent. A design patent protects how the product looks. So 2 very different areas, but in general, utility patents are way more expensive, way harder to get, and way more complicated. Design patents are less expensive, a lot easier to get, and not as complicated.
Okay. Right. Below the line, maybe if I can home in a little bit or focus in on maybe what if I can see this from a seller perspective, maybe, right? Because a lot of
Sure.
times when you hear about black hat tactics, something that you just mentioned on Amazon, often you just get what will happen to me then if I do this and I get caught. And it's like, well, at the end of the day, it'll be in violation of Amazon's guidelines, which will in the worst case make you lose your seller account, but it's not actually illegal per se. But listing hijacking, if I understood this correctly right now, like below the line, is also, you also have grounds to combat listing hijacking, on the grounds of intellectual property law, right?
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. So that's where we're going to how to get rid of those hijackers. But yes, if someone is
Mm-hmm.
piggybacking off of your listings, that yes, you do have legal grounds to go after them, to remove them, and possibly file a lawsuit.
Mm-hmm.
That gets a little bit more difficult depending on where some of those hijackers are located. But again, that's something we will touch on.
Okay. Yeah. Um, to my third question is how do you basically register for intellectual property? Like, can you maybe tell us more about that?
Yeah, sure. So trademarks you apply on USPTO.gov. USPTO
Mm-hmm.
stands for the United States Patent and Trademark Office. It takes about a year or so to register. It can depend. It could be a little quicker. It could be a little longer, depending on how smooth the process goes. There is something called an office action that's often, or not often, but sometimes if say a trademark is confusing or there's another similar trademark out there, the USPTO sometimes will send out what's called an office action, which is essentially a rejection, but they want you to further explain why your trademark should be registered. So depending on if an office action is received, it could take a bit longer. But ballpark is about a year or so. And if you're foreign domiciled, so if you are outside of the United States, you do need a U.S. licensed attorney in order to register for a trademark.
Mm-hmm.
And copyright, you apply online with the U.S. Copyright Office, and it generally is about $65 per application, and it takes about 3 months or so to register. And I skipped over this, but for trademarks, it's about $250 per class to
Okay.
register. So there's different classes, there's subclasses, but if you're registering for apparel, that would be one class, and that's $250. And if it's in something else you want to register, then it would be an additional $250 fee.
Okay.
And lastly, patents also with the USPTO. So again, this covers trademarks and patents. The USPTO design patents take about a year or two to register, and ballpark is about $3,000 to $5,000. And utility patents about 3 to 5 years to register, and 7,000 to 20,000. So these are very expensive. So it's one of the reasons why some sellers are hesitant. There's a lot of trademarks. Most sellers today, I would say, or a high percentage, have trademarks. Patents are not as common, especially utility
Mm-hmm.
patents, because they're very timely and they're costly.
I
So
can
most
imagine.
people
Yeah.
aren't
Yeah.
gonna, yeah, they're not gonna go out on a limb and just say, oh, let's get a patent on it. It
Yeah.
costs a lot of money. You have to hire lawyers to analyze it for you and file
Right.
for it, and it takes a long time.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, let's go like maybe to carry on with these, on these preemptive steps. Let's say you want to protect yourself from hijackers. What would you say are the first or the most important, the most crucial preemptive steps that you should take?
Gotcha. Okay, so the first step is registering for a trademark.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it's not difficult to do. If you live in the U.S., you can register for a U.S. trademark on your own. Some sellers aren't comfortable doing it. You can always contact a lawyer. You can contact me. You can contact someone else in the U.S. But it is crucial, if you want to protect yourself from hijacking, is to make sure you have a trademark registration. Number two is to enroll in brand registry. Now, most sellers know what this is at this point, but it is crucial. This unlocks tools that are designed to help you build and protect your brand. It just
Yeah.
essentially creates a better customer experience. So it can really help assist protecting yourself from hijackers,
Mhm.
and you can remove those suspected infringers much easier. It's way
Mm.
more simple. It's quicker. So I highly recommend it.
It's only a win-win situation there, actually, right?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
there are eligibility requirements. So you do have to have an active registered trademark. So you have to be registered to enroll in it. But
Mhm.
more recently, in the last couple of years, Amazon came out with a program called IP Accelerator, which now
Mhm.
actually doesn't require you to register. Now, IP Accelerator, basically what it is it connects sellers. Amazon connects sellers with law firms that they recommend. And if you use their program to file the application, you actually can enroll in brand registry while it's still in the application phase. So that's not a few weeks. That could be, as I mentioned, up to a year. It could be even a little bit more than that. So you can start enforcing your rights before it's actually even registered. So again, something I would certainly recommend.
Yeah.
So, and then lastly, or not lastly yet, actually, sorry, but the transparency program, it's something else you also have to be eligible for. There are some, in the Amazon world, all sellers don't necessarily love this because it involves putting barcodes on your items. So Amazon can verify before they're shipped. So you can prove what's legitimate and what's not.
Mhm.
It was a
Right.
great idea. I remember when this first came out, maybe about 4 years ago or so, 5 years ago. But it's costly because you have to, and there's more work involved. So your products have to be managed under brand registry. You have to have that registered trademark, as I mentioned. Your product also will need a global trade item number, a GTIN, such
Okay.
as a
Right.
UPC.
Mhm.
And you'll have to apply those unique transparency codes on every unit that you manufacture. So I think that's the main issue a lot of sellers have with it. But if you weren't aware of it, it's certainly something to look into whether you decide to actually go for it or not.
Mhm. Mhm.
And then also want to bring up the Project Zero program if anyone's not familiar with it. So
Okay, I'm not, for
it's
example. I don't know if I should
yeah,
have said that openly now on this
perfect.
webinar, but actually, yeah,
Perfect.
this is
That's
the first
why
time I'm
I'm
hearing
here.
about it.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Basically, what it is it's transparency, the transparency program on steroids. So it does also
Okay.
involve unique codes for every unit that you manufacture,
Yeah.
but sellers get the power to self-remove listings of their products if they believe them to be counterfeit, and so they can do it without Amazon intervening.
Okay.
It is a little bit more difficult to actually get. So again, same thing with the transparency program. You have to have a trademark. You have to be enrolled in brand registry. Here, you also have to have submitted a potential infringement to Amazon in the past 6 months, and it has
Mhm.
to have at least a 90% acceptance rate on those submissions. So Amazon will look at your track record before you can even enroll in it. But
Okay.
again, it's a great tool to have
Yeah.
to enforce your IP rights and to remove hijackers.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It also sets the threshold a little bit higher. It's nice that they can keep on coming up with these, yeah, thresholds and
Yeah,
processes that ensure that
it's
at the end of the day, of course, they're super. Amazon is the most, consumer centric company I know, but that it also puts that sense of, that sense of centrism to also the sellers as well, because they, of course, make up the community as much as the consumer is doing. So, yeah,
absolutely. And
yeah.
what's happening is I think they're a bit hesitant because there's some issues with some sellers filing complaints and essentially taking advantage of it and filing too
Mm-hmm.
many complaints because they can self-remove hijackers from their listings. So
Yeah.
yeah, you want to be really careful about that because Amazon could remove you from the program if you do that, if you
Okay.
take advantage of it. So it's not something I would recommend. It's also something I haven't brought this up yet, but test buys are also really important and what I mean by that is a test purchase. So if you suspect
Mm-hmm.
a hijacker, say you're selling a product for $50 and the profit margin is very low. Say it's a $2 profit margin, just by way of example. If someone is selling that product for $25 for half the price, you should have some doubts and you should suspect, okay, how are they offering the product for so cheap? and you could just do a test buy. You don't even have to guess like, okay, I think they're a hijacker. To know for sure, you can buy the product from them and see what they ship you. Very often when the price point is that significant, it's not going to look like your product.
Yeah, sure.
So
Yeah, yeah. And that is, of course, that would be great evidence, of course, where you can say, hey, listen, this is where you can then basically initiate those tests, but with actual evidence in your hand rather than just finger pointing and then just spamming, Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So that's actually something I would certainly recommend for whenever you're accusing someone of counterfeit, you want to have evidence that they're actually selling counterfeit products.
So to the final question, basically, so what to do in the actual situation? What to do if hijackers actually appear on your listings? What are the steps then that you can take? All the preemptive measures, they haven't helped. It actually has happened. And what is the last thing, or what is the situation then?
Okay, so let's say you've done all this, you've registered for a trademark, you're enrolled in brand registry, maybe you join the transparency program, maybe you join the Project Zero program. Say hijackers still appear. And
Yeah.
quite honestly, that's still very possible. These are all just ways to help prevent it, and they have been very helpful to thousands of sellers, but that doesn't mean it's absolute. It still can happen, absolutely. So the first thing you want to do is you want to continuously monitor. Now, there are some brand owners out there that don't monitor their listings very often, or their products. You want to constantly be checking, and I don't mean a few times a year. I mean weekly at minimum, and that can be that could be a bit of work. That's one of the reasons some companies, they want to focus on growth and increasing their business, so they hire other people to do it, and that's fine. But you want someone at least having eyes on those listings, especially the ones that are very profitable, because your margins can go in the tank. Your sales can really plummet if you're not on top of it. So, and it's something other sellers are looking for. I see it all the time where sellers are looking for other products to get involved with. What listings are hot? I'm a lawyer. I'm not as much of a business guy when it comes to Amazon listings and that. So I don't know how they track what products are doing great and how they can track all of those margin things like that. But it is certainly something that's being done. So you want to monitor. I would say weekly or even a few times a week, have somebody monitoring them.
Absolutely.
Also, of course, I'm going to recommend hiring a lawyer to monitor them. You can do it yourself, but I always recommend, hiring a lawyer, someone that knows what to look for and what to do should hijackers appear. So if a hijacker does appear, what lawyers do is submit what's called cease and desist letters. This letter just says, and you need to stop selling your product. Here's why we believe you're infringing. You're selling counterfeit products. You're infringing on a trademark. Here's the trademark registration number, and you need to remove your listings. Otherwise, we're going to escalate the matter against you. Now, often, a lot of sellers in response do actually comply. Now, if they don't, then that's when we start filing reports of infringement against them. Now, as I mentioned, that's easier when you're part of those programs. If you're enrolled in brand registry, if you're part of transparency, it's easier to actually enforce, but not absolutely necessary. You can still file a report of infringement on Amazon. It's just a basic form that you can file. You want to be careful. You don't want to just have, a thought, or you're like, I think they're infringing. I think that's enough. You want to be careful. I would seek a lawyer's advice to make sure that they're actually infringing before you file the report. Because if you file a report and it's not accurate and that store, gets suspended, they can try and come after you for lost damages for a false report. So it's just something to keep in mind. Don't think it's always a one-way street. You always have to have, a basis behind those decisions that you make.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, thank you so much for that. Maybe can you tell us, like, from experience? Now, I don't, like, as you said, all the different paths you can take in this particular case. But what I was wondering right now is what actually happens to that thing that we mentioned at the very beginning. The loss of trust. At the end of the day, sure, you can write a cease and desist letter. You can you can report the infringements. At the end of the day, but if the damage has been done, you have to regain the trust of your customers again, even after your listing has been hijacked. So I would say, actually, as much as you said, it's not always possible to prevent a listing hijacking, but those preemptive steps, they are crucial. They are super important, right? And doing that would be actually the first step. I mean, the fifth question that we addressed today is basically the last instance to do what, if nothing else help, right?
Yeah. So you definitely, the preventative measures are going to be crucial. As far as, say, the damage is done. So that's why I think monitoring is so important, because you want to stop it before it gets bad. So if one negative review comes in, that's not necessarily, obviously you don't want it, but it's not the end of the world. It's a lot better than dozens or hundreds of them before you notice like what's happening. So if you see one negative review, or you see a new seller jump on a listing, that's when you have to already say, okay, I'm going to do a test buy, or contact the seller, or do something about it before it gets worse. So that's what I would say at the beginning. You don't want to wait until it's already really bad. But even if that does happen, right? So let's say you don't notice it. Say you didn't have the money to hire someone to do it, and you were focused on other things. Dozens of negative reviews come in, and your listing really, really plummet. Now what you can do is contact seller support and inform them of the situation. Now, Amazon's not always easy about removing reviews, but if you have evidence, or if you say like none of these, Amazon knows what reviews are associated with what seller, right? But on Amazon's pages, on each listing themselves, the reviews are all together. So it doesn't say this unless the specific seller is actually named in the review, which most of the time it isn't. It says if the reviews are all for one product, which is pretty unfair, because if you're a great seller and I'm a horrible seller, but even if we're selling the same product, like you shouldn't be penalized for the mistakes I make, So, but that is something you could do if everything goes wrong, and we discussed, all these issues, and say you tried, or for whatever reason it didn't work, hijackers took over the listings and destroyed it. Keep in mind, you could still contact seller support. You could still try and get those reviews removed. You could still try and recover from it. But if you follow some of these steps, hopefully you won't even be in that situation.
Absolutely. Cool. David, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule today to join us for this interview. Thank you for the insights. Maybe can you just tell us where, if in case people want to contact a lawyer, how they can contact you? What would be the easiest channel? Yeah.
Absolutely. So my email address is david@damlawfirm.com. My cell phone number is 516-313-1572. And you can also find me on my website. It's damlawfirm.com.
Perfect. Okay. Then once again, David, thank you very much. And
thank you.
See you around.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
Take care.
Bye-bye. Take care.
Bye.